Welcome, TEI family, to another episode of The Everyday Investor. Today, we have a very special guest. This gentleman has acquired a number of skills throughout the years. He has leveraged those skills into ownership in companies in some of the biggest industries. Let's welcome Myles Baker. What's going on, Myles?
Hey Dave, how you doing, man? Thanks for having me on.
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for being on. Definitely look forward to chatting it up with you today, and man, just learning about you and kind of have how you have came to be up until this point. I know we talked a little offline, but the goal of this channel is pretty much to kind of use these different interviews as case studies uh, to talk about how the guests have acquired skills over the years and have leveraged those skills into uh, their investment vehicle, whether it's stocks, whether it's real estate, whether it's businesses, to not only be able to make more money like as of now, but also build up a nest egg in retirement at the retirement age. So I guess with that being said, I always like to start at the beginning. So how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Was your family middle class, lower class? Did you come from a wealthy family? I know me myself. And I use the term hood rich. We was hood rich. We was in an area that my mom, she gave us all the things that we needed, but we also had some of our wants. But it wasn't until later on in life where I'm like, man, we was doing good for where we were at, but looking back on it, we probably was in a lower class. We weren't going on vacations or things like that. I had to pay for college, so it wasn't like she was paying for college or anything like that. So how did you grow up, and again, where did you grow up?
Okay, so I grew up in Detroit, Rosedale Park specifically. If
Okay.
you're familiar, so I grew up with a working class family, I would say, right? Both my parents worked jobs, pretty hard hours. My dad was a journeyman lineman and been one since like the 70s, 80s.
Wow.
My mom was a flight attendant, so she's worked for Delta before it merged with Northwest before it merged with Delta. So she's been a
Gotcha.
flight attendant for almost like 25 years.
Wow.
So I would
Wow.
say I've had two parents that worked hard to put food on the table, but because of that, we were always okay, right? I never felt
Oh,
like we were without, but we
right.
were definitely a working middle class
For
family
sure.
in the city of Detroit, and my parents always did what they had to do to get it done.
Gotcha.
Until about I was about 8 or 9, my parents split up. My
Okay.
mother remarried and married a man who lived in Novi, right? So he was a
Yeah.
black man entrepreneur, tech
Right.
guy, ownership in businesses, worked the same job for 30 years. And he kind of gave me a totally different perspective on investment, hard work. So it was kind of like I got the 10 years in the city growing up, seeing what it
Right.
really did in the city. And then I got 10 years after moving out to Novi, where I went to Northfield High School and was exposed to a whole different world of opportunity and kind of what that looked like outside of what
Right.
I had already known.
So for people who don't know, who may not be familiar with Detroit, obviously, you hear about Detroit, you hear, whatever you hear about Detroit, good, bad, or indifferent. But would you say Novi was kind of a more upscale neighborhood or city compared to the Detroit area?
Absolutely. So even if you know
Yeah,
Rosedale Park
for
is
sure.
actually a nice area in the
Yeah,
city. It's a good area of Detroit, but moving out to Oakland County and kind of seeing
yeah.
that suburban, or at least what was going down in the suburbs. Yeah, I would say it was different. It was different.
So no, that's interesting. And I guess my next question, and I'm interested in your answer to this question in terms of, did your parents or your stepdad or whoever kind of talk to you about money growing up? Because I guess up until this point, it seems like it could be a rich dad, poor dad. Obviously, not saying that your real dad was poor, but I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the Robert Kiyosaki Rich Dad Poor Dad, which that was like one of the first books I read early
Hmm.
on, and
Read that
kind of
too.
really
Yeah.
talked about his real dad was just a hard worker, blue collar worker, and his rich dad was somebody who kind of played the investment game, played the just whatever the money making game, so to speak. So was that type of scenario where you learned a lot as far as investing and things like that from your stepdad, or did your real dad or or stepdad talk to you about money, or did your mom talk to you about money, or did anyone talk to you about money? Because for me, it was like a growing up in Muskegon, Michigan, which is the west side of the state of Michigan. Again, we knew we needed money to stay where we stayed at, and for food and to pay bills and things like that. But it was almost like a taboo subject where, my mom, she didn't talk about investing and things like that, and she just didn't know any better. So it's no fault for her, but family and friends and man, no, wasn't nobody was talking to me about investing your money and how you can grow your money. So how was that conversation with you and your family growing up?
Yeah, so for me, it almost came way like similar to what you said, but both my dad and stepdad were both good with money and always have been.
Okay, okay,
My dad, in a way that he spoke to me about money, was do what you can do in your life to set yourself up to have your own, because then you can truly do whatever you want, right?
right,
So that's me being 10 years old. Man, I wish I could XYZ.
right, right,
My dad said, all right, well, do what you need to do to get your own, and you can do whatever you want, right? So it was always he put that in my mind as a what maybe he didn't know, like a motivation for me almost my whole life is a if I set myself up to have my own, no one can tell me what to do with it,
right, right,
and it makes me comfortable, right? So like I'm in control of my own life if I do the right things with my money to get to a place where I can, invest freely, buy the things that I want, or
right.
use those tools because I put in the work to kind of guide my own ship.
Right. Okay. And actually, that's a profound statement in and of itself because, unfortunately, where I grew up, it was a lot of people just living off of the government and things like that. So just to have that mindset early on of, hey, man, if you work hard and you do what you have to do, you can kind of live the life that you want to live, as opposed to, trying to always rely on the government or,
Even rely on my parents, right? Or
right,
rely on other
exactly,
people around you,
exactly.
or all
Yep.
of that, right? So they were like,
Man,
cool,
that's
like you 16, but you should go get a job if you want to
yep,
go to the movies and you
yep,
want a car and you want to
right,
XYZ. So like, or you get mad at somebody telling you what you can and can't do it, and you're on their dime like that. I use that as a
yeah,
kind of like a backhand motivation of like, all right, well, cool. Well, when it's mine, you don't have that control over me. And then I would say on the opposite end, what my stepdad taught me about making money was more of like a discipline standpoint.
okay,
Like you have to do certain things, and if you don't, there will be consequences for those things, right? Like,
yeah,
all right, well, how am I gonna, I want to do X, Y, and Z when it comes to school and getting grades. Like, okay, cool. But he was tough on me with grades, and that made it very serious for me to stay in school and do well in school because it was kind of a you get out what you put in scenario, right?
okay,
So in that, but I also learned from him passively too, because you see monthly that Charles Schwab mail
yeah,
hit the thing, and he like,
yeah.
okay, yeah, you don't know about that yet, but you will. And I'm like, okay, so I'm knowing that that's investment accounts, and he's putting money
Right.
away and investing in things that he knows will continue to make his wealth grow. So for him, it was almost anecdotal, like specific things, and then for my father, it was like life lessons and
Yeah,
him always kind of having his own and
gotcha.
wanting to mirror that.
So, was there ever a time, before you graduated high school where, because I know I have a daughter now, and way before she gets to graduates high school, I'll talk to her about investing, whether it's stocks, whether it's real estate, whether it's investing in businesses. So it's not like just high level concept, but kind of more. We're getting off into more of the granular stuff. Obviously, I'm not going to talk to her in middle school about like these super granular principles, but definitely before she leaves, she's going to know kind of the ins and outs of stocks and maybe risky investments, index funds, things like that, less risky investments, more risky investments, real estate. I have a kind of cool real estate story as far as kind of my introduction into real estate, which is kind of one of my main investment vehicles. But did your real dad or stepdad ever talk to you on the like more of the particulars about I know you talked about your stepdad having a Charles Schwab account, but did they talk to you more about the particulars of having this investment account as opposed to just kind of seeing it and seeing the value of it and things like that?
So I actually think that more in a traditional way, they taught me about saving
Okay,
versus
gotcha.
active investments, right? Which
Yeah,
I think that that's kind of a cultural experience as well, too, right?
I
Where
agree
you're
with
like,
you.
hey, man, make sure you
Yep,
put it away
yep,
because you never want to not have it. So
yep,
it was kind of more specifically about if you make money, make sure you save money because
yep.
if you blow it all, that will be your biggest issue, right? So
Right.
I maybe wish that I got more specific investment advice
Okay.
younger, but I definitely always knew that it existed in a realm, and it was
Right.
kind of like me doing my own research or like at least figuring things out and then asking questions that came later. But I do think it was valuable to be aware of these things early.
And the reason I asked that question is because once you have family, start to have your family, including your own kids and things like that. Would you do anything differently compared to what your dad and stepdad kind of taught you growing up? Would you get more off into the granular things at some point, or would you just keep it high level, or just kind of these life principles of kind of saving money, put it in a way? How would you kind of go about that situation?
I think now that I have those tools in my belt, there's no way I wouldn't pass them on to the next
Right.
generation. Absolutely. So even when I think about You know, I had friends and colleagues growing up whose parents established lines of credit for them when they were, under 10 years old,
Yeah.
right? And then you come and you're in a market where you're trying to have your credit score do something, and you're like, oh, look, I have 25 years of
Yeah.
established credit. Like
That's
that's something that I didn't benefit from growing up.
yeah.
But I do see those things and immediately was like, absolutely, there's no way I wouldn't do that kind of
Yeah.
stuff for my kids. So of course, I mean, I had, grandparents doing CDs and kind of bank loans and,
Yeah.
notes and bonds and things like that, where I get them from, my grandparents. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. This
Yeah.
does mature in 30 years, I'm
Right.
30 this year. So that kind of thing are like traditional investment practices. But there's no way that I wouldn't pass that stuff on. And even to the point of, like I said, just opening a line of credit just to let it accumulate
Yeah.
without any real consequence, because it's not like they will be controlling their own finances at a young age. So
Right, for
absolutely.
sure. But definitely talking to them. So I have, and we'll get off into this later, where I have a brokerage account, but I have a separate brokerage account. It's still in my name because my daughter she's young at this point. But where it's kind of her account, and as she gets older, and I'll talk to her about the things that it's invested in, the ETFs or particular
Hmm.
stock or business, and how at least do I, from my perspective, how do I evaluate a company and decide whether or not to invest in that company or not. So those are things or conversations that I plan on having with my daughter as she gets older and kind of really is able to understand a little bit more uh, those type of things as opposed to just. I mean, it's good. I think it's a lot better just to, or it's good to just have the account as well, but to be able to have them
Yeah, let them
understand.
know and control it and have an idea of what it's doing and see it
Right.
grow. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you're in third grade and you're like, hey, look, remember what it had this amount last
Yeah.
year and
Yeah.
what we've done, and you might only see 2% and you think, well, that's not a lot, but you're like, it is over time, believe that. So I
Right. For
mean,
sure. Yeah.
definitely lucky to have that set up at a young age, because you can learn from it as it actually is growing instead of just concepts, right? That's real assets.
Right. No, absolutely. So then moving on to you're about to graduate high school. Did your parents talk to you about college? Did they talk to you about, okay, do you want to get a skilled trade such as being an electrician, being a plumber? Do you want to go drive trucks? I know you came from that blue collar household. So what decisions went into, okay, you have to do something after college as opposed to maybe just kind of going and working at a factory for the next 30 years? Because that
Yeah.
model probably worked a lot better in the 60s and 70s, but obviously in the 2000s, man, it's with technology and all that stuff that model maybe doesn't work as good as it once did.
Absolutely. So for me, I mean, even us, I mean, I went to high school in what 2010, or college in 2010. So that was the epitome of, if you don't go to college,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
never gonna be nothing. So it was not an option for me,
yeah.
but it was an option as to what I wanted to go into
Okay.
and what I wanted to do. But for sure, it was a go ahead and get to applying because you're going to school. I
Okay.
mean, sure, maybe if I had something else on the floor at the time that would have been lucrative, that I think I could have actually
Yeah.
made sense.
Yeah.
But at that point, I probably would have been making a business case to my parents that was not even my
Right.
choice to make, right? So I'm doing the things that I was doing as a junior in high school, applying into college. I obviously eventually chose Michigan State,
Okay.
and then that was likely because my brother went there.
Yeah.
It's a state college, you
Absolutely.
know. I
Yeah.
would say 10% of my high school class from Northfield went to Michigan State. Like, it's one of those kind of things. Uh, so that was a decision that I felt comfortable with. When it came to choosing my major,
Yeah.
I would never say that I grew up as the kid saying, "Oh, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up." Right?
Yeah.
Some people have that story where they're like, "Man, I knew it from the jump," or "My dad is a lawyer,"
Right.
or "My uncle is a lawyer and he played a
Whole
huge
family.
role in my life."
Yeah.
And yeah, this is what I want to do. It's almost like my family heritage. So I didn't have that. I
Okay.
chose political science pre-law,
Gotcha.
with nudges from my family, knowing that being a lawyer can obviously be, I mean, a prestigious industry, of course. I mean, a
So,
prestigious job. They say there's only a few like real careers, right, or
yeah.
professions.
Yeah.
Everything else is a job.
It's a job.
Um, so I did that on a whim of, okay, well, I think I can do this. I know I'm adept to language and words, and
Right.
these are things that I like. I was never big on math and science. Well, I was, until I was like, I don't really know if this is my thing.
Right.
So I did that, being pre-law political science, and kind of once I got into it and took the
Yeah.
classes and understood the concepts, it grew on me more and more and more. And that's something that I think kind of solidified the decision that I made. Otherwise, just made because it felt right.
So that's an interesting thing because do you feel, even looking back on it, and I know a lot of people don't like to have regrets, or in my life it's different time periods or decisions I would have made maybe differently, knowing what I know now. And similar to your story, I mean, I just had a good mentor because as I was coming into Michigan State in undergrad, I was actually playing football for them. And like most college athletes, it's like, hey, man, we're putting all our time and focus and energy on to football, and this school stuff, we'll figure this out later. And, you know, my cousin, who's an attorney, man, he gave me a lot of great advice over the years as it relates to, you know, school and what to go into. And he opened me up to a lot of different industries that I just never knew existed or can happen. But before I enrolled into Michigan State, I was staying with him. He's a criminal attorney. So he's coming home with his stories. And I'm like, man, this sounds interesting. But obviously, looking back on it now, criminals are always doing something dumb. And when you kind of tell out that story, it's like, man, this is an interesting story. So but because of that, I told myself I was going to do political science pre-law because he did his political science degree, earned a political science degree down in Jackson State, and he ended up going to Michigan State for law school. So I'm like, I'm gonna follow that path. But he said something that was profound, and man, this was a game changer for me. He said, hey, because I wasn't necessarily sold on the idea of going to law school. I was just mentor and of kind of following after him, and he was having a successful life. His life has gotten much better since then. But even at that point in time, 10 plus years ago, he was successful and looked at with power and prestige. And I'm like, man, it just makes sense for me to do that. But he was like, hey, you said you like math and science, do engineering, and you can still go to law school, because if you decide not to go to law school after or with having that political science degree, then you're going to be screwed. So, and I without knowing what even an engineer was, shamelessly at 18 years old, I did that and it worked out perfectly. But for you saying that, okay, did political science pre-law, and man, I'm a big proponent of, I call them basket weaving degrees. Don't go to college and spend money and get a basket weaving degree. But looking back on it, knowing what you know now, obviously to get in law school, you just have to have a degree, not necessarily a political science pre-law degree. Would you do anything differently from with your undergrad degree, or would you still kind of do it the way you did it?
So, I mean, I 100% see where you're coming from with that, right? Like, I don't know if myself I would have chose to be an engineer, but a political science pre-law degree I did with the intention of knowing I was going to law school, right? Or
Right,
if at the end result is I have this political science degree, what do I do next with this political science degree, right?
right,
So,
right,
like you said, I didn't pigeonhole myself, but I was on a track, right? And if that track didn't look good, I was either going to pivot that track or end up with a political science degree where I'm like, all right, do I go into politics, right? Do I want to go
right,
into public policy? Do I want to go work in somebody's cabinet, or work, I guess, in politics in general?
right.
That would have been kind of where I took myself.
Okay.
Um, I did think about that stuff, right? I'm like, okay, well, there are other things that I could do with this, but maybe in a way of, if it didn't work out so perfectly,
Yep.
I could have seen myself, or maybe would have seen myself, get a more general degree, right? Like even business, right? I think about the JD MBA program that Michigan
Yeah.
State had. I'm like, maybe if I would have did one more year, would I have value from having a JD MBA? Like,
Yeah.
I definitely love the business side of the law. And that's why, as we talk about it later, I went and was working in-house with the company as their
Yeah.
in-house legal counsel. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just like a special dynamic, because you get to be a legal mind in a business setting. So I
Right.
think that I definitely would have lended myself toward a business setting because I have good communication skills,
Yeah.
teamwork skills, and I think that I could apply that to a business setting just as well as I do to a legal setting.
So
So,
would you have still done the political science pre-law route to go to law school, or do you think you would have did like, okay, more of a business degree, business background, and then just still went to law school and kind of made it work now, knowing what you
w-
know?
with hindsight being 2020, I'm glad
Yeah.
the way I did it. I did it the way I did, but I do
Okay.
think that I would have done a different degree. Like, obviously,
Okay.
I understand political systems a lot, and
For sure.
obviously the dynamic, which obviously leads into legal studies.
Yeah.
But I do think there is value in having a, I guess, diverse undergrad degree that can
Yeah.
then feed into your legal practice. Like, I think you did that perfectly with the
Yeah.
engineering degree, because there's not a lot of lawyers that even want to touch engineering, math, and science in general. So
For
you have
sure.
already given yourself a specialized skill. And I
And,
think that business and law work so well together that maybe that's something I would have done.
okay. Yeah. And even then, at least when I talk to people, and I have a funny story actually. So I had a dinner to go to past couple of days, and so I'm kind of picking up some clothes from the cleaners, but I had a shirt that was clean, but it needed to be pressed. It needed to be pressed. And So I go to the cleaners, and this is a cleaner that I typically don't use. It was a new cleaner, so I went there and so I'm asking, hey, do you guys press shirts? She's like, yeah, but we won't be able to press it today. So I'm like, oh, man, so can I put an iron to this shirt? I'm like, man, this shirt costs a couple $100s now. So she's looking at it and she's like, man, I don't know why you guys spend so much
I got to
money.
read that tag.
Right, no, exactly. And that's what she was doing. She's reading a tag, but as she's reading the tag, she's like, man, I don't know why you guys spend so much money for shirts. And then I'm like, man, I'm an attorney. She's like, you're an attorney? And she's like, you look too young to be an attorney. So she's pretty much saying, I mean, you look like you're younger than 30. You look too young. I'm like, so at this point, it's an interesting scenario now. So I'm like, man, I actually have an engineering degree and a law degree. And then she was like, oh yeah, I'm about to go press this shirt. But so she pressed that shirt that day. And I think that's interesting. So I'm saying all that to say that that just one example, but other examples, when I tell people I have a law degree and an engineering degree, it's this automatic, and people don't like to, like, there's stereotypes that, man, everybody is stereotyped at some point in their life. And just telling people I have that engineering degree and that law degree, they automatically assume that, okay, this is a smart guy. And yeah, I mean, whether that's true or not, I guess that's a lot more times than not the stereotype that I would get when telling people that. Which
They
again
got the
has worked.
papers that say it.
Right, for sure. Right, exactly, and that worked to my advantage. But yeah, I don't know. That's why I always ask, would you have done things differently? Well, from doing a political science route to maybe something else, knowing that you still wanted to go to law school. But I mean, if you know you're going to go to law school, at least in my opinion, if you know you're going to go to law school, or if a doctor knows they're going to go to med school no matter what, then it's, hey man, go ahead and do what you do. But I have seen the other side of that, where it didn't work
Absolutely.
out, where that person didn't go to law school, or that person didn't go be a physician, and now they're like struggling trying to. Not, I don't want to say they're struggling; they're doing something, but now they're
Yeah,
making
but your
40, 50
path
grand a
has been
year.
altered, and you got to figure out what the next move is.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
And now their
I would say
earning
that law
potential is
school
different.
is unique because it allows you to do that, right? Like you don't need a specific underlying degree.
Right.
Like I even know people who are attorneys with English majors, and I'm like, that might not have been a fun undergrad, but I'm sure you're
Yeah.
nice with the grammar, right? Like so, like
Right,
that
right,
feeds into being a lawyer,
right.
and you can do that specifically with the legal field, and kind of let the cards fall where they lie. I would say I'm lucky, and with the butterfly effect, maybe this is exactly what I was supposed to do. Like
Right,
this was my
right.
path, but I
Yeah.
do think there's more skills to be learned with a different degree than where you end up going to law school, for sure.
Okay. No, I got you. I got you. So then, as you're in college, and I know this is, whether it's, I guess, ultimately you chose to go to law school, and we'll kind of get off into what went into those decisions. But as you were in undergrad or even law school, did you have any like mentors, maybe whether it's your parents or someone else, that helped you kind of mold your mindset or shape your mindset? 'Cause I always think mentors are important. Kind of talking about my cousin, who, in great example of a mentor who told me to go to college, or not to go to college, but to do engineering as opposed to political science. I mean, I thought as a mentor that was invaluable advice that changed the trajectory of my life, but also just different things that he exposed me to. I remember when that first year or the summer going into undergrad, he took me to a couple of his rental properties. Just kind of, he was doing some work on them or getting some work done, and we just went by, and man, that blew my mind. I'm like, what? We can own property? Like, that was a game changer for me, and I always put that in the back of my head because I was going to undergrad to play football and all that. So it was something that I wanted to come back to, and I did come back to eventually. But just having that type of exposure from mentors that was on a level that I've never seen before, man, it played a big part of kind of shaping me and molding my mindset and how I go about things. So in undergrad or in law school, did you have mentors, or just in life? Can you kind of talk about mentorship and the importance of it, and then maybe mentors that kind of shape your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually think that growing up, more specifically, and when I get to high school, college, and law school, right, where you think of this, I'm making my own man, right? I
Right.
was actually very resistant to have mentors, which I think is more
Really?
common than you want to talk about, right? Like someone, like they assign you as a 1L your first year in law school, like,
Yeah,
hey, here's your 3L mentor. I was like, man, I don't need a mentor. Like I'm figuring this stuff out,
yeah, yeah,
man.
yeah, I
Like
got
I
this.
got it, right? Like I've always been good in school. I can do this again. I've
Okay.
always been good at this. I can do this again. So
Yeah.
for a while, I was like almost hesitant to want someone to tell me either how I should do it or how they did do it. I do think that I had definitely had mentors, but I also was like, I was kind of resistant to it in a way that I think was
Wow.
not healthy, right? Like, yo, if there's a a person who has done what you did just 2 years ago and they're
Right.
close to you and you can access them, you
Yep.
should 100%
For sure.
use that to your advantage, right? So I would think I've had mentors, and of course, like I said, my mom is one of my best friends. My dad and my stepdad were all
Okay.
people who taught me things that I needed to know, whether I was accepting it straightforward as
Yep.
mentoring. And
Yep.
then, like I said, even lifestyle choices. Like, I mean, I like moving to the Northville, Novi area. I mean, seeing my friends and their parents and the access that they had to things, I was like, these things are very real and
Yep.
out here.
For
So I'm
sure.
almost like a learn vicariously kind of person where I
Yep.
see someone else doing something that whether they're telling it to me directly, I'm gonna sit back and watch. Like I'm the
Right.
youngest kid. I'm like the quiet person in the room, but I'm gonna be paying attention to everything. That's kind of how I thought of my like organic mentoring growing up.
Gotcha.
And then definitely in law school have mentors and even now like attorneys in practice that
Yep.
I go to with both personal issues, legal issues, and
Yep.
everything. And I take it a point of myself
Yep.
to reach out to people and try to be a mentor as well too, because like I said, was hesitant to it. And I think sometimes people need to be pushed into
Yep.
mentoring.
For
And
sure.
now I try to do that in a way, whether it's through the Wolverine Bar Association, which is a black bar association in Detroit,
Yep.
or organically through our firm. I intentionally try to help people and kind of pull them up behind me because I think that I was initially resistant to it
Yep.
because I was almost arrogant in a way of like, bro, I got this. I don't need anything from anybody if I can figure it out myself.
For sure.
Luckily, I didn't have to fall flat on my face to realize that I needed other people. But obviously, as the more that I understand that I don't know everything, is the more that I lean into mentoring with others.
Yep.
Um, and then, of course, like I said, try to give back to other people through mentoring them myself. I actually get a lot of gratification out of
For
that.
sure.
So
Absolutely.
I think mentorship is critical, and at any point that you can use it, whether formal or informal, whether organic or inorganic. So I
Yep.
say organic is people that you obviously run into, and you just say, "Hey, there's
Yep.
something about that person that I see in myself," and if it could be me in 20 years, or if I could help them get to where I am in X amount of time. Those are, of course, your organic mentors. And then I participate in like mentorship programs, right? Where I'd say these are more inorganic, but hey, we're going to match you with someone that you think you could get along with or learn something from, and
Right.
then use that as a way to continue an ongoing relationship that otherwise would have been forced, but then you can use to have commonality. So I do think that mentorship is huge. I think that I did it a lot informally early in my life,
Yep.
and now I'm more deliberate about seeking out people that I think can help me get to where I want to go.
Man, look, we got to unpack that a little bit because you said a lot of
Man,
things that I couldn't agree with more. Just growing up, it's okay to not know everything. You're not going to know everything, but to be able to have someone that you can go to who knows a little bit more about this particular thing or just about life than you and for me, from an analytical standpoint, because I think I have that type of brain where I can use these different experiences from mentors or whatever data points to
hmm
try to get all this information and analyze it and kind of try to make sense of it. And the more data points I have, I think I'm better off as far as kind of making more wiser decisions as I'm kind of making decisions on whatever the case may be. And again, I think you also talked about having like the inorganic or the organic. So like your parents, things like that. They're say more on the organic side, but it's okay to form those inorganic mentorships where you're reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, you're doing, because again, regardless of how amazing your parents are, how good of people they are, they just don't know everything, especially when you're talking about, hey, my parents aren't attorneys. So they are going to be able to provide limited information on that subject. But if I can reach out to different attorneys who I think, can give me some great advice or be a great mentor, that's only going to help me. I know when I was kind of doing my IP law, starting that out, and I got a great mentor at the firm that I was working at, who's still a good friend to this day, and he really took it. That's one thing that I want to say about mentorship is, especially if you get the right mentor where they're like vested in your success.
absolutely.
Uh,
That's called a champion right there, right?
and
They
they-
want to be at the table speaking your name loudly in the right rooms. You need those people. It is critical
but
in
they're giving
any
you
position you're
game,
in.
and they're giving you game. Like I would, as a patent attorney, I would have. I'm not the patent attorney I am today without him kind of really schooling me and really pouring into me, making sure I'm doing things right, and just teaching me, being a teacher as opposed to just yeah, whatever. I have this kind of mentor that I have to kind of I give advice to here and there, but
Yeah,
really
they want to go to lunch every once a month, and I'm
yeah,
gonna
for
go
sure.
because they make
Yep,
me go. Blah blah
yep,
blah. Yeah, like
yep,
it has to go from that inorganic where it feels forced to like now we're both,
Yeah.
it's an exchange, and that becomes so much more valuable than any forced relationship for sure.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So then, okay, so we're talking about mentors, but then how did you kind of navigate the networking, or was networking, is that something that you thought about consciously in college? Because I think college for me was big for three things. One is to be able to be accountable and be responsible. A lot of times, a lot of people, this is their first time off on their own, where they don't have their parents telling them what to do, waking them up, so you can get some type of accountability, or become more responsible in college. The second part, hopefully, if you do it right, you can get a skill, not a basket weaving degree. But the third thing is networking. I mean, obviously, we talk. Everybody who is a part of kind of my circle of people who I kind of really keep in contact with, these people who I met, whether it was engineering or law school. So these, and again, have kind of built my network. And as my saying is always, your net worth is your network. So
I was gonna say your own line on you,
yeah,
bro.
for sure, for sure. So how was that in college? Is that something that you really kind of thought about consciously? Because me going through it, I didn't think about the term networking, so to speak, but I always identified people who were doing something with their lives, whether their degree type or their degree path, or the other part was just had good character and somebody I wanted to really be associated with, and not some scumbag or somebody who's trying to just get over to get a dollar or whatever, but just really associating myself with people of good character, but also people who I thought, man, this guy's going to be somebody or do something. So is that something, how did you go about that in college, or is that something that you really just didn't think about at all as far as networking?
So for me, I've always been a people person, right?
Okay.
I think that I don't know very many talents that I have. You think about, oh, a talent.
Yeah.
We were talking about college athletes and
Yeah.
XYZ.
Yeah.
I think that my strongest talent is to be put in any room in the country and be able to talk to somebody, right? And have a conversation and
That's
connect
really,
to people and understand what they're talking about and have my points understood. So I've always been, I call it the gift of gab, right? That person who's going to go into a room and network a room and work a room.
yeah.
Like I'll walk in there and shake everybody's hand and introduce myself to people that I otherwise have no business doing it. But it's intentional for me to want to make those connections. And
Right.
you never know how they can be returned. I,
Absolutely.
again, don't like, similar to mentorship, don't like forced networking, right? Where I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, after work, you got to go to this thing and make sure you get 5 business cards because then it's going to turn into something. That's not that's
Yeah.
not real. I mean, it is
So,
in a way that you might get lucky, but you
yeah.
want to have, if I go to an event and have a
Yeah.
legitimate connection with 1 or 2 people, I'd rather do that than work a room and just try to collect business cards so I can
Yeah.
hit my number and go home. So for me, it's always been like you said, try to find people that you think you actually relate to with some character, or by speaking to them, you find out that you have a connection, and maybe you don't. And if that comes around later in the way of a business referral or just a like a shared hobby, you never know.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always been be intentional to speak with people, have yourself heard, and try to be in the right rooms.
Right. For sure.
I
And again, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so I'm not like I used to dread that too in law school. They're like, make sure you network, and it's like that can be such a dirty word if you think about it as a task, right?
Yeah,
But
for
if you
sure.
go and you're like, hey, you're a person, go meet people that you have a reason to be in the same room with, whether that's through a association, through a cocktail mixer, black business XYZ. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's more important to be present and actually speak to people while you're there than it is to just go, right?
Right, for sure. I mean, and look, man, hey, you definitely dropping gems. And this is the whole point of this channel, to kind of talk about these things such as networking, such as mentorship, that maybe are more or less taboo subject, but how they have they can play a big role in your life. I think another thing that you talked about is just being relatable. I think that's a big part of it, as opposed to looking at this as a task to want to collect business cards and things like that. But just talking to somebody, being able to relate to people. Again, I'm a person who, I'm an introvert at heart. So when I do it, it kind of drains energy from me. But I understand that it's necessary, and it's always good to learn. For me, I'm a big person who I like to talk, especially talk to different people of different cultures. So I have people who are Middle Eastern that I'm friends with, obviously African American, Indian, Caucasian, whatever the case may be. That kind of enriches my experience. Just different, talking with different people of different backgrounds. I do have a quick story about that. I normally try to get out at least 2 to 3 times a week, go out, cigar lounge, whatever the case may be, network. This past week, And it becomes more natural. I'm pretty sure you can attest to that it becomes more natural the more you do it. So I was going to the cigar lounge this past week, and I normally go to the bar just because it's the bar. You're going to be able to talk to more people as opposed to sitting at a table or whatever the case may be. I mean, I normally go by myself just because I kind of want to talk to people as opposed to just sitting there being on my phone, whatever the case may be. So the bar was full. So now they're leading me upstairs. This is a place I go to regularly. So they know my name. Hey, David, the bar is full, but hey, so I normally don't sit at tables because I want to talk to people. So whatever, I'm here now. So they kind of escort me upstairs, and it was a table that they escorted me to, but it was a table adjacent to that had just a person that looked like he was by himself. So I instantly hey man, are you sitting by yourself? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, cool if I sit with you. So we just started. We sat down talking, and again, we had a lot of different things that we can like relate to each other on, and telling them again, you can feel out. That's the other thing with kind of going out networking. You can feel people energy. I can feel if somebody's a sleazeball or if they are not for the right thing. And this genuine guy, and same thing, like, man, you're a cool guy. We ended up talking for like 30-40 minutes. He bought me a cigar and a glass of wine, and we're talking and kind of telling about our different lives. And again, we just related to each other. And at one point I told him I have a podcast or whatever, and he had a buddy out in Los Angeles who I think he worked at the #1 advertisement company for podcasts. So he literally messaged him. He texts him like, hey man, this is a guy I got a good feeling about. He was talking about me to his guy. I got a good feeling about this guy, man. He seems genuine. He seems good. So he was like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's get my contact information. And then he emailed him also and kind of included me on that email. So just right there, just being
Man, you
out
just never
networking,
know. Yeah,
just
the most random thing in the world.
and it can be
And you about
something
to
that
have
leads
ad
to
revenue all through this
sure,
thing.
exactly, and just making the right connection. So that's just something that I also wanted to point out from a networking perspective. You just never know. So man, I think that's
Also about being on. I mean, not being on your game all the time, but like you never know where you are, right? Like be
right.
aware of your surroundings. Like be
Yep.
aware of how you carry yourself. You could be
Yep.
next to somebody who
Absolutely.
you never know. You get into one conversation, or they see you acting a certain way, and however that conversation could have went, it's
Yeah,
now going a totally different way.
for
So, I
sure.
mean, I think
Yeah.
that's a good note on being conscious of where you are, but also being, I mean, open and available for conversation because once you do, you just never know if it could be beneficial.
Absolutely. And like you said, don't look at it as a task. I wasn't sitting down to this guy to try. I didn't know what he did. So it wasn't, I couldn't go to it like, hey, I got this ulterior motive to try to get him to do something. I just, okay, he's here. He at
Chopping
the
it up.
cigar lounge, and let's chop it up and see what can come out of it. And, we'll see what happens, if things if it can be mutually beneficial on both sides. But I just thought I'd throw that in there just because I thought that was a great example of networking and kind of being intentional and not trying to go out and just get business cards and things like that, but man, just have a real conversation with somebody, be relatable, and you'll be surprised on kind of what
Yeah,
can
that's
happen.
ultimately value.
For
That's
sure.
that's just can't put a value on that.
Absolutely. So then, okay, you're in law school. What was the decision to go to Michigan State College of Law? Was it anything in particular? So for me, they gave me a 75% scholarship. So that, I mean, even though I got accepted to other law schools, that made it easy right there. That schools weren't giving me 82 grand or whatever for those 3 years. Plus I was already familiar with the campus, having been there undergrad. So I thought it kind of made sense, or it just made perfect sense at that point. So what went into your decision of, okay, I'm gonna choose this law school as opposed to this other law school?
Okay, yeah. So mine is similar to yours, but different in a little bit of a way, is because I applied to most of the schools in Michigan, a lot of schools in Chicago. I was kind of thinking like, hey, big city. If I could get there,
Yeah.
that would be great, right? Same thing happens. It's like the third school I'm waiting for back. I think I get a full ride to Indiana Bloomington, and I'm like, man, that's a top 30 school. Like that feels good. It's a Big Ten school. Like I've never been to Indiana, but I mean, the name ring bells. People know who it is or what it is. I could go there and
Yeah,
presumably have a successful career.
sure.
Um, Maybe a week or two after that, I get a full ride scholarship from Michigan State.
Yeah, you
I
can't
think it
beat.
was a little bit of the hometown discount, but again, same thing that you said. I was already on campus, one
Yeah,
less thing to get familiar with,
yeah,
and they just gave me, I mean, $115,000
yeah,
or
for sure.
whatever it
Like,
was.
yeah,
So I'm like, man, if I can go get a, a great degree from a school that I can go to California and say I went to Michigan State College of Law, and they're gonna be like,
Yep.
"Oh yeah, the Spartans, Magic
Yeah, for
Johnson,
sure.
blah
Yep.
blah blah." Like
Yep.
the name carries.
Yep.
It was one less thing to get used to, and talk about investing in yourself. A full ride scholarship to law school is huge when it comes to paying that off in the future, right? So that's one less thing that I have to have on my balance sheet when I'm looking forward,
Right.
into the future. And then the reason that I chose between two schools with full rides is because all of my connections were in Michigan, right? Whether they're Detroit, Metro Detroit, Lansing,
Yep.
greater greater Michigan area, it made most sense for me to leverage those connections by getting back to a place that I wanted to be. So why go to University of Indiana if I'm going to eventually come back to Michigan, right?
Gotcha.
So with it being the decision between those two, it made more sense to go with Michigan State, a place that I was already used to. I mean, I had just finished 4 years of undergrad there, so I went
Yep.
straight through. So I just did 7 years in East Lansing,
Right.
right?
Same thing. Same
Yeah,
thing.
one less thing to get used to. Not paying tuition is huge, and then being able to stay home and leverage my connections that I
Yeah.
already have in Michigan to try
Right.
to either land a job
Yeah.
or continue that organic networking like we were talking about. Because I tell that to a lot of people when it comes to law school too. Like there's only two real decisions: to go where they give you money or go to school where you want to end up. And
Right.
if I could have both of those together,
Yep.
that felt like
Perfect.
that was the decision for me to stay local and avoid the cost. So that's why it was perfect for me.
So then being in law school, like I said, for me, it was uh when I made the decision to go to law school, and actually I was just going to law school. I mean, I guess I did find out about pan law maybe towards the end of my undergrad. So I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do once I finished law school. And obviously a lot of people, whether I think they don't know, it's not like you go to law school to get a criminal law degree or to get a bankruptcy law degree or any particular law degree. You just go in there to get a JD, Juris Doctorate degree, and then you're kind of
You can
going.
kind of specialize from there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and going to law school, like how did you like always wanted to want to do one thing more than the other, or how did you kind of make the decision on what type of law you wanted to practice once you finish law school?
Okay. So for me, I mean, I'll explain. I'm a cannabis regulatory attorney that I
Okay.
do both licensing and general business advice for the regulatory aspects of what I would say is the most highly regulated field in the country right now, more than alcohol, more than tobacco, more than
Yeah.
gaming. And then I'm a commercial litigator. So any two businesses suing each other for any reason under the sun, I get called in and say, "Hey, can you help my business with this
Right.
lawsuit?" Um, so in a way, I thought I wanted to be a litigator, but all of that is off of borderline your stereotypes of what lawyers do, right?
Right.
With the lack of knowledge, I'm like, oh yeah, I will go to court and
Yep.
you write briefs and you argue and you
Yep.
represent your clients and you pick up the phone and you yell at somebody and you slam the phone and say
Sure.
no deal. All of that was like my idea of like what a lawyer did. And I used that kind of in law school and kind of just found my way with like, okay, this does work for me. Like I got lucky with that. I
Right.
do think about transactional attorneys and obviously being on the deal side and being able to use your negotiation skills, maybe less in an adversarial way, but like
Yeah.
working toward a common goal. I think I would be good at that too. But I, in law school, was doing the Trial Practice Institute. So that's obviously the program that gets you what they
CPI.
say trial ready in
Yep.
law school, right? So you do the whole pre-trial process and then the trial process as part of the two of the 3 years of law school. So for me, it was kind of like all of these pieces that I'm building led to me being a litigator.
Yep.
Once I got into the legal practice, actually, one of my big mentors at the firm was a younger attorney, kind of one of like a loose cannon of the firm, right? And he's like, I'm doing this cannabis stuff, and they're like, what? No way! Half the firm is upset about it. Half the firm is like, well, it's a legitimate field, and there will be money to be made.
It was like
Was
a
like
taboo thing at that point in
it
terms
was
of
very
time because it
taboo at
was
that
new.
point.
It's like, oh, you're doing, but now it's like in okay, that's like,
Robust area,
yeah, for
healthy
sure.
part of a law firm,
Yeah,
right? Like, and at
absolutely.
that time, it was taboo. Like, they were like, I don't know, and I'm an associate on the files, and he's like, "You want to help me with this stuff?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." Like at that time, you might know, Dave, but I had dreadlocks like down my
Yeah, man.
back.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
for
"Man, this is
sure.
perfect." Like I didn't even know this existed in law school. Now Michigan State has a cannabis law class, and I've actually spoken there and done panels with
Wow.
Michigan State Law School when it was not a thing when I was a law student.
Yeah.
So like I did go the traditional route of like, "Hey, I think a litigator is what I want to be because I am that stand up and speak in court kind of guy. I
Sure.
am willing to argue and get try to be persuasive and prove my point.
Right.
But then from there, it was like once I got into practice, I really found like a niche that I just, found a mentor that kind of extended the olive branch to join him with the matters that he had, and that
Right.
helped me get an expertise in a field that has been
Yeah.
3 years legalized, and I've been
Sure.
practicing for almost like 5 years in it. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's like you can become an expert quickly.
Yeah.
But I would say I chose to be a litigator, which obviously taught me the skills of reading laws and statutes and learning where your weak points are and where your strong points are.
Yeah.
And then I found a niche once I actually got into the field.
And that's, man, again, a couple of things that I wanted to break down with that is important with finding a niche. That's essentially what patent law is a kind of a niche field of law where you have to have a particular skill set or whatnot. So I think that's important because you're going to make the most money in those niches where everybody, for whatever reason,
Become a resource because everybody
exactly,
can't do it. Yeah.
exactly. And I did you always have an affinity for like cannabis? What made you say, okay, yeah, was it just an opportunity there, or did you have an affinity, for another
Yeah, I
reason?
mean, it's around, bro. I think that cannabis is a culture. Like,
Yeah,
if you think about it
absolutely.
like that, like
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
has an experience with
yeah,
cannabis,
yeah,
right? Like, it's a cultural thing. It is obviously a medicinal thing, and
yeah,
it is now a major revenue source.
for sure.
And me having a simple understanding of at least the concepts of it
Yeah,
helped me immediately grasp it when it came to a legal aspect.
for sure.
And to sometimes read a regulation or a statute and be like, they don't know how this actually goes, right? Like you have legislators writing laws to govern a whole industry, and then the more that I learn, the more I see that sometimes these regulators don't even know exactly
Yeah,
what they're regulating. So
absolutely.
for me, it was a good relationship with something that I understood, and it was like an opportunity where I was like, I didn't even know you could do this at a
Yeah,
major law firm, right? So for me, it just kind of
yeah,
clicked because uh, almost like a cultural thing.
for sure. And I think you're leaving one big point out that I want to really touch on. I think Taylor, and this is another thing about the whole networking thing and building your network. We all know each other. So obviously, Taylor Weaver I'm
Yeah,
talking about, and he was on here and he kind of talked about being able to leverage his skill set, which is normally it costs a lot of money to get somebody such as him to kind of do work on a particular case for a company or whatever, and being able to leverage that to say, okay, I'll just take equity in the company and I'll help you out at a reduced cost or maybe for free depending on the amount of equity. So can you, and this is the whole point of acquiring a skill that's something that's valuable, because man, if you're working at, I don't want to feel like I'm bashing on a plant, but if you're working at a plant for 30 years, like nobody's gonna kind of give you these opportunities, these life-changing opportunities or potentially life-changing opportunities to come kind of help them out in different ways. It's like, I know we're going to pay you a livable wage or a working wage to come help me out in my business. But now you have this skill or you're developing this subject matter expertise in this niche field. So now the company, like you said, the guy is starting up his own thing. He's like, hey, do you want to help me out? But he's not just saying, okay, I'm gonna just pay you a salary. It's equity and there's other things tied to that. So can you kind of go through that process, walk through that process of how that came to be and the importance of that and how kind of beneficial has that worked out as far as leveraging the expertise to get some equity in the cannabis company?
absolutely. So that same partner that approached me about working on his files at the firm that were cannabis related, about 2 or 3 years into my practice, went to go be the chief legal officer of Emerald Growth Partners, which is Pleasantries. So when he left, I took over most, if not all, of his Michigan files. So I'm servicing our Michigan clients
Yeah,
as the main point of contact for at least a year, almost a year and a half, while he is in house as one of the clients of the firm. So I'm helping him now as outside counsel
yeah,
because
for
he is the
sure,
chief legal officer, and now I'm servicing all the other clients that he left behind, essentially. So I'm boots on the ground learning everything that I
for
can
sure.
about cannabis because now it's critical. It's different to be, you
Yeah,
know, option two versus now option 1A, right? And I'm like, hey, they called me like there's no lapse in time.
right.
And then, like I said, about a year and a half into doing that, he actually had a director of compliance role open up. He said, well, as soon as that role opened up, I knew exactly who to call. He gave me a call and was like, "Hey, man, do you want to come do this thing with me, kind of on the company side?"
Right,
And I'm like, "That's perfect because you know that I know these rules back and front. You
right,
know that I know how to do this from the outside counsel standpoint." And it offered me a very unique opportunity to be inside the company and kind of see how the sausage is made, right? And
Yeah.
not just be a lawyer in your watchtower offering business advice
All right.
to a company that you've never been integrated with. And with that opportunity to come was an opportunity at equity in the company, right? So I'm like, I mean, the industry is booming. There seems no better time to kind of both dive fully into that niche that I was developing by being, again, that in-house aspect let you be a legal mind in a business realm,
For
and say
sure.
sometimes you just need another smart person in the room to help this go the way that it's supposed to go, right? And I could be from a rule standpoint, yes, we can do this. No, we can't do that.
Right.
I was in the stores helping with inventory. I was, helping them get licenses and do inspections from, you know, MDARD and Myosha and
Yeah.
all types of
Yeah.
regulatory work that was a broader scope than what I would have actually been asked to do in a law firm. So it gave me an opportunity to dive deeper into my expertise,
Yeah.
get equity in a company and in an industry that I believe is going to blow up and continue to blow up. And then I did that for exactly a year, vested a bucket of equity. And then at the same time, the firm that I'm with, I left a hole, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we have attorneys that do what I do in several other states, but Michigan was a need. And I used kind of my additional expertise that I just gained by going in-house with the company to leverage that back to the firm that I'm with now and was with before, which is Dickinson Wright.
Right.
So it was kind of like an opportunity to get equity, learn more than I would be able to otherwise because it's a hands-on experience, and
Right.
then go back home with the same knowledge and still have pleasantries as an outside counsel client, still service plenty of clients in Michigan and other states. So it was like I almost counted it as like I was like absconded, right? Like that's right when your attorney goes and works to the company for
Yeah.
a specific amount of time. Like
Yeah.
it was the perfect scenario for me to learn all the things that I needed to learn and leverage that to make my next play.
So, like, it's a couple of things. I guess the first question I want to ask you is, would you have done? Because it seems like obviously the equity almost was like just a cherry on the top. I mean, I think it's big value, and a lot of people, just the average person, they don't know this, but when you're doing legal work at a private firm, obviously you're getting expertise, and you know a lot of different things from the legal side, from the private firm standpoint. But it's a different part of it, like you said, maybe from the business standpoint or whatever, that you maybe don't know how to do just because you haven't done it when you're on the business side of things. There's other things that you're taking into
Yeah, as a
account.
lawyer, you do exactly what they ask you to do, right?
For
Like,
sure. Yep.
I want you
Exactly.
to answer this specific
Yep.
question.
Yep.
Like
For sure.
in house, it's like, hey, we have a general issue, and this whole team is moving forward toward goal A, B, and C.
Yep.
How do all these things work together? So you're stepping outside of your role. You're wearing 5 different hats that necessarily, as a like I said, a lawyer in your watchtower, that doesn't even bubble up to the top of asking for outside legal assistance,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
it was like I said, real world experience that is invaluable to be able to then offer to clients, right? So I can say, no, I know how this really goes. Okay. I
So,
know what you need to be doing. I know
yep.
what you're not doing right now. And I have that relationship with our regulator, the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, but based on being an attorney and
And
being part of the operation of a company.
so he really know what's going on. He's just not on some theory, looking at the statute stuff, but
Not reading the rules,
yeah,
not
for
like what
sure.
they think a lawyer is being a nerd, like,
Yeah.
well, the rules say, like, no,
Right.
I'm like, I can
Exactly.
tell you what happens in this industry.
So I got a couple questions for you. So with that, would you have still taken that opportunity to work in-house if it didn't have the equity standpoint, or if it was still enough of a benefit with just learning the other side that you would have still did it even if the equity wasn't tied to it?
I think I did it because it was a breath of fresh air.
Okay.
You've worked in law firms, you know how it goes,
Yep.
and you can work as hard as you want, and there will always be more work to do,
For sure.
right? And I'm like, okay, sometimes you're searching for your why. Like, and I'm like, all right, well, I like what I'm doing, but if there's something that could make this better for me, both on a personal satisfaction standpoint, and I get to learn and I get to do the things and be with the people that I want to be with. Like I said, bro, it was a mentor directly to me. And the director of legal ops was also a person who was directly a mentor to me. So it was like our legal department over there was 2 other attorneys. It was 3
Right.
attorneys total that I would have rocked with,
Yeah.
equity or not.
For
And it
sure.
gave me an opportunity to do those things.
Yeah.
And it was a cherry on top. So like,
And
I
look,
think sometimes you got to do it for knowing the benefits of it,
yeah,
not
yeah.
just the monetary or the
For
equity.
sure, for sure. And again, we like to use the word finesse in our culture or whatever, but I don't even. I don't. I think finesse really isn't the proper word for it, but just to kind of break down and give a summary of what you did to these people. I don't want to say to these people, but what you did ultimately. You're at a company making, let's be honest, a lot of money. You then go to in-house. I mean, you're working at a law firm making a lot of money. You then go in-house working on the company side of things to get even more experience in this particular niche field of law. You're still getting paid a salary, and you had equity in the company. Then once that equity vests and the law firm wanted you back, now you have more experience. You have
Use
not
it as
they really have
leverage.
exactly. So you have a lot more leverage because you have more experience, and they really want you back. And now they really have to pony up to get you to come back. It's not like, okay, well, again, man, it's the price yesterday isn't the price what it is today type thing. So now you're coming back there, you came back there in a lot better situation than what you left with having all the experience that you acquired in that year, so that you was working at the company level. And I don't want that to get lost in the shuffle or lost in translation or in a conversation, man. That's again, that's the whole point, at least from my standpoint, my perspective, my opinion. That's what acquiring a skill is. It gives you opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to kind of make the most out of. And then again, you're still making good money. You're getting equity in companies that you feel that it's growth opportunities out there. And man, I tip my cap to what you did. I'm not sure if you were intentional as it relates to it kind of working out that way, or if it just kind of fell in your lap. But regardless of the matter, man, I think you did something that others can learn from, and I'm hoping that people who watch this they learn from it. But it is something that I think should be applauded. Absolutely.
Hey man, I appreciate it. Absolutely. I use it as leverage as the extent that I could,
Yep,
man. Made it make sense for me and for both,
for sure.
all the companies that I was at. And
Yep.
I appreciate it, man. Like I know you doing your thing too. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
get like Dave Spears, let's be honest.
We,
Trying
hey,
to hop
we
offline and be like, just tell me where to give you the money and where you want to put it.
Hey, look, we all try to, but again, I appreciate you having you in the network and just being able to kind of build that relationship with you and people who doing stuff. But I guess the last thing I do want to touch on, we talked a lot about you acquiring the skills that you've acquired, working in niche fields that you believe in. You being able to, kind of leverage that skill set to, have ownership in different companies or whatnot. But the second part of the everyday investor, the first part being just acquiring the skill, using that skill to get a position that you're making at least $75,000 or more as a single individual. Even though a lot of times these skill sets, that whether it's law or engineering or coding, some physician, doctor, whatever the case may be, a lot of these people are going to be making a lot more than $75,000 a year. But then being able to kind of use that increase, and we talked about this offline, but using that increased earning potential or the increased revenue that you're able to generate, based on having this skill to invest in different things. Now, obviously, that my kind of investment vehicle is real estate, although I do have, a brokerage account, and I do invest my 401k, try to max that out. Can you kind of talk about, okay, with all this, I don't want to say extra money, but with the increased salary and the increased, revenue, what do you like to invest in? What is your investment vehicle, and how did that come to be?
So I would actually put my investments into like two buckets,
Okay.
like traditional, and if you want to call those like boring, and then things that I'm more passionate about. That's
Okay.
kind of how I think about investments on the fun side, is things
Uh,
that I would want to do and things that interest me, because then it makes me want to do them, right? So of course, like you said, similar on the investment side, I'm a huge proponent of maxing out my 401k.
Yeah.
I would like the money to never hit my
Yeah,
savings or
for sure.
checkings
For
account
sure.
because it's taken off the top, right? It goes tax deferred. I'm gonna max that boy out,
Yeah,
and it won't hurt me, or I don't think that it will
for
hurt me
sure.
if I
Yeah.
never see it, right? I
Yeah.
think it's very difficult to get a paycheck at the end of 2 weeks, knowing you got bills, knowing you got things that you either want to buy or need to buy,
Yeah.
and then saying, all right, but I'm still gonna put this $1,000
Yeah,
worth.
for sure, man.
And of
It's tough.
course, we all do that, and to the extent that you can, that's still very valuable. But to have that happen kind of behind the scenes, to me, is very valuable. So I do that. Traditional brokerage account, which I will put more kind of liquid assets into in a way that I can be more risky with them, right? So I can lean into kind of tech stuff or lean into emerging markets, still to a point, certainly indexed and ETFs, but I can do individual stocks in that
Yeah.
brokerage account too.
Sure. Yeah.
So I can work with a financial advisor if you don't have one, or think about it at least, right? Because I again lean on experts who know more than me,
Hey,
because that's something that you learn as being a lawyer too. I don't know everything, and there's nothing more valuable than calling in your experts.
and
So
yeah, and again, that's a good life lesson as well, because like you said, you learn it is, in a legal field, but you can apply it. There's a lot of times where people are, man, you're not going to build this deck or do this painting, or man, look, I let the experts. I stick to what I'm good at, and I let the experts do what they good at, as opposed to me trying to save a nickel or dime, trying to do this stuff on my own where I have kind of no clue when I can pay for the advice, or let the experts who actually know what they do and lean on them to kind of, just, give me information that is going to ultimately benefit me as well, as opposed to having to take the lumps and losses and stuff like that.
exactly. So leaning on both that 401k and
Yeah,
then other investment vehicles, whether they be, like I said, brokerage accounts or other kind of indexes that you can put money in and watch it grow, whether it be at a slower rate or a faster rate, is money that's otherwise not just sitting in a savings account that can still grow
yeah,
and be kind of watched over by one of those experts who can help you kind of and call and make decisions like, hey,
yeah.
I'm seeing this. Is this something that you want to do? And I mean, depending on how I'm feeling or risky or not,
Right,
no thank you. And
right,
that's
right.
you always have that option because you put that money with them, and it's kind of their duty to help it grow. So that's what I would call my traditional bucket of investing.
Okay.
And then fun things that I like to invest in. So like this is a clothing brand that I started with one of my really good friends, right? And it's a way that I did a sustainable business where we do a pre-order model. We make designs. That's something that we like to do in our free time, right? It's a creative outlet for otherwise being in such a business oriented lifestyle.
For
Is
sure.
that I can like make t-shirts with my friends. So what I mean? But it's a
Sure.
lifestyle brand that I made with Apollo Brown, who's a producer. I mean, big in the Detroit scene, but really does this thing. And me and him together have basically a pop-up shop style clothing brand where we monthly or quarterly or whatever drops we want to do, we open it, take pre-orders, close them, fulfill those orders, and can kind of keep a creative aspect going and generate income from it,
Right.
right? Once we got that nest egg in, everything else is a bonus. It's
Yeah.
something I do for fun, and it's
Yeah.
something that at the end of the day, no matter what, is going to make me something, right?
For
So
sure.
that's fun for me.
Yeah.
And then super non-traditional, and I don't even know if you count this as investing, is I'm a avid sneaker collector. Like I have
Okay.
a great sneaker collection. Maybe this will resonate with your younger artists or younger audience, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I got a sneaker collection of almost 200 pairs of shoes. Like, and I won't think of it as an investment, but in a way, it's
Yeah,
commodity, right?
absolutely. And
Like
people,
these
man, the
things
sneaker,
that I
man.
have gain value,
Yeah.
and I can keep them and
Yeah.
pick and choose what I want. And if I can get it at a right price, do that, buy, sell, trade, and use that as
Yeah.
a collection that I have that does accumulate value, and it's something that's fun for me.
For
Like
sure.
that's not that's not maybe the everyday investor, but it's definitely
No,
a
but
fun thing for me.
But that's the whole point. And before I say this, look, you are the only person that I know who, every time I see this guy, he has a suit on and some J's or some type of tennis shoes. A lot of times
Man,
they're J's. And
except
man,
for in
that's
court, that's the only place I don't do it. But if you
right.
see me
You
at a
have to, yeah,
wedding, at an event,
absolutely. But again,
anywhere that I can wear a suit, I'm wearing
yeah,
sports.
for sure. And obviously the court, they have, this kind of strict guidelines where, obviously they go about things a certain way, and that's cool. But just to being able to have that freedom, that flexibility, that, about yourself, or even because even a firm, there's not too many firms that you're going to walk in and, these guys have on Jordans or tennis shoes with their suit or their, business casual look. And that's
That's
something
me.
that obviously you've been able to, I'm not sure if it's something you negotiated within your contract, whatever, but they have came to accept that at the law firm or the company that you work with. And I think that's having, at least in my opinion, having that leverage to be able to say, hey, this is kind of how I want things. Again, whether or not it actually worked out like that in real time or not, but it seems like it's something that, hey, whoever you're associated with outside of going to court, it's something that they're okay with. And I mean, I don't know, I just think that's super dope. But
Man,
again,
I've always been lucky with that, man. I've always presented myself as being myself. I let people know that it's a hobby of mine. I use it as a talking point. It's actually not bad for networking at all. And I'm like, oh, like you like these shoes? Let me show you my collection. And people are like, oh my God, my mind is blown. So I've always just held it as a
yeah,
way to be true to myself that doesn't hurt anybody. And if that gives me joy when I'm going to work and
yeah,
being in certain crowds, I'm gonna do it because it's hard to get to where we go in these business and have it not try to change you or do
yeah,
something or fit the mold. So it's just my one little way to rebel and get to still be myself
for
and use
sure.
it as an investment vehicle and like a talking point.
Absolutely. And again, I think this is kind of going back to, I guess, the point of the channel, being able to leverage a skill. Because do you think you would have been able to do the things that you're doing? Because again, let's just kind of be clear. The most that you can contribute to your 401k account a year is $20,500. And most people, I know we talked about this offline, for one reason or another, is not contributing half of that. In my opinion, I think it's because they just the numbers just don't work out where they can contribute that much and still kind of take care of their everyday life. Which, I mean, obviously that makes sense. But you being in a space where you have invested in yourself, acquired a number of skills in niche fields, and being able to increase your earning potential and invest in things such as your clothing line, to be able to have riskier investments, and as well as kind of max out the 401k, where you're putting, again, a max in every year, that obviously at the end of 20, 30 years, whatever the case may be, that's going to be a nice nest egg. But to be able to do that, which a lot of people isn't doing, and that's really the bare minimum. Like, if you don't do anything else, no type of investment, I'm still saying invest at 20,500. But a lot of people are not even doing half of that. But for you to be able to not only do that, but you have a riskier bucket where you're doing more risky things in the tech space and whatever the case may be, that, again, you need to get it right one time, and that can be life changing. But also to have your own business with the clothing brand, which is important, but also with the sneaker collection, you're doing a number of things that, at least I think they should be noted, that being able to acquire your skill and increase your earning potential, it allows you to do these different things. It allows you to enjoy life. Again, I'm pretty sure people, or the viewers of TI family, I mean, we're young guys, so it's not this whole thing of just work, and okay, you're going to have a nice nest egg at 60, 65, where you can enjoy life. But no, we can enjoy life every day. We can be happy. We can do the things that we enjoy, good work-life balance, and still have this nice nest egg at once we retire, we start to slow down. I don't really believe in retire, but once we start to slow down a little bit, I think that's the whole
That's
point.
a Dave Spearsism. I don't believe in retiring.
Yeah,
That's
no,
a
yeah, man. I'm gonna keep going. I'm like Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett. I'm gonna stop when I croak. But again, you being able to have this increase, acquire these skills, have this increased earning potential, it's just, again, it allows you to do so much and live a good life in real time, as opposed to 65 or 70 years old. And I think that should be that's worth being noted. And again, hopefully, the viewers see that, and that kind of resonates with them in some way. So, I mean, hey man, you're doing a great job, and I mean, again, we're honored to have you on. To you kicked a lot of gems today. I know you talked about the clothing line, and that, can you? And I'm gonna ask you also, where can people find you? Whether it's we want you to represent us from a commercial litigation standpoint, where there's, hey, we have some cannabis questions, or whatever the case may be, we have a company that we would like to kind of pay you for your services, or whether it's just social media. Where can people find you, if you don't mind sharing your information? And then we'll also put it in the description portion once we actually release the video and the podcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn at Myles J Baker. That's always a good place to reach out to me.
Okay.
On Instagram, I am at the Fresh Baker, and my clothing brand is Freshwater, with at Freshwater Brand on Instagram, or freshwaterbrand.com. You could definitely find me on Dickens Wright's website. So you'd probably be able to find me, Myles J Baker, on Google.
Okay. No, yeah, I mean, again, and that's good. That's interesting. You gave the website. I'm not just, pulling people who, are in theory, or, are not doing what they say they are doing. I mean, these people are they successful, I guess, in real life. I don't like to use that word, real life, but they're successful in real life, and they're having a good time, and they're making big moves. So, man, I appreciate. What are some of the goals before we end for today? What are some of the goals of yours going forward, whether it's personally or professionally? I think that's always kind of good to have you say, just so, because this, again, we're young, but we still have goals that we want to attain, and heights that we want to reach, whether it's philanthropy, or just doing bigger deals, or doing more deals, whatever the case may be. What are some of the goals going forward?
Absolutely, man. So I'm actually, which is a shock to me myself, but a year away from eligibility for partnership at the firm that I'm at. So I think that
Nice.
that's professionally
Yeah.
a good goal, at least for me
Nice.
right now. Kind of diving back into the law firm would
Yeah.
be to join the partnership ranks and kind of see how I can navigate myself and continue to generate my own business, right? And bring in clients that I know I can help contribute to, but they can help contribute to me.
For
So
sure.
that's professionally a big career goal of mine right now. Obviously, like financially, it's continue to grow that nest egg, make the right investments. Right, I want to be able to look at it at the end of next year and say, all right, these are I'm confirming that I'm making the moves that I want to be making. Right.
Right.
So whether that just is to continue to accumulate assets, um, and then advance professionally, man. Obviously, want to see my brand continue to grow. That's a
Yeah.
fun thing for me, but it's all kind of, career based and
Yeah.
then financially, right? To keep walking in that right direction. I got a
Absolutely.
lot of time left before we not retire,
Right.
according to Dave. So as long as I'm doing the right things and keeping that ball moving, that's kind of what I'm working on.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, again, man, we appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time today. I mean, I think you dropped some nuggets, some gems that I know for a fact that people listening, and they're going to be able to take that and apply that to them, to their lives, so that they can level up, if you will, and just kind of be more, I guess, be more valuable, and use that value to kind of leverage opportunities as you have done in many ways, and just kind of make more money and. Just become more successful, if you will. So again, appreciate you giving us the time
Man, thank you. I
this
appreciate it, man,
morning.
for real.
Again, hopefully, man, in a few years, whatever the case may be, as you're doing bigger deals, become part of that partnership track. And I mean, we would love to have you come back and just do a part 2 or whatever, so we can kind of just check on you and kind of see how life has been, over time. So we definitely appreciate the time today, and hey, look forward to talking to you going forward.
Man, I had a great time, bro. I appreciate you, Dave.
Definitely. Take care.